This is Captain Edgar Mitchell, U.S. Navy retired, lunar module pilot of Apollo 14, and your host for this story. Although I have recorded the story of Apollo 14 and my impressions of that flight elsewhere in another cassette volume, there was a particular experience that occurred on the flight that I think is worthy of a separate telling. It's a story all its own. It's the story of the powerful emotional experience that I had in space as I looked upon the beauty of our planet as it appears in the cosmos. It is the story of the effect on my thinking and my life as I came face to face with the deeper meaning of man's existence from the vantage point of being one of the privileged few to leave the confines of Mother Earth and to venture out into the void of space to see our world from afar. I would like to share that story with you. I would like for you to sit back, relax, and imagine with me the following scene. We're in the cabin of Apollo 14, having just left lunar orbit after a very exciting, fulfilling, and successful exploration of the lunar surface. The rugged moonscape is receding in the background, its features slowly becoming smaller as we watch out the cabin window. We are several thousand miles away now, and the little planet is clearly a sphere in our field of view. We are tired but exhilarated, not having eaten in 12 hours nor slept in 22 since before leaving the surface. Our mission in lunar orbit and on the lunar surface were both highly successful. We have completed all the assigned tasks and we're now on our way home, gratified, happy but relaxed, and very tired. The crew tasks are light, giving us a chance to rest, to make up the sleep deficit of the last few days, recover from sore muscles, and bask in the satisfaction of a mission well done. The spacecraft is small, but with ample room for the three of us to float around to our workstations in the weightlessness of space. A small amount of dust and debris float in the cabin, left over from the transfer of dusty pressure suits and equipment brought up in the lunar module from the moon's surface. It will be several hours before all those tiny loose particles are trapped by the filters in the air conditioning system. I take this opportunity to look out a spacecraft window to catch a glimpse of planet Earth, our home planet, as it moves past each of the 5 windows in turn, for we are rotating slowly like a beef on a barbecue spit to allow the sun's powerful rays to be equally distributed over the spacecraft. In fact, we call it the barbecue mode, even though the official name is Passive Thermal Control, PTC for short. The official names are cold, technical, and usually tongue twisters, so we frequently use more familiar terms. I take the opportunity of the relaxed workload on the journey home to contemplate Earth, to view the little planet that is our spaceship, we the people of Earth. It is a rare event. I feel privileged to be one of the first of only a few persons in all history to leave the planet and be able to view it from afar, from deep space, to get out of the trees and see the forest, but of equal importance, to now have a few private moments to take in this scene and to muse upon its deeper significance. It's a beautiful little planet, blue and white, and set in the black emptiness of the universe, surrounded by billions of bright stars as a backdrop. Stars in such profusion, but which we never see from the surface of the Earth without a telescope, because our atmosphere screens out their light. This is a sight that bores deep into the soul and shakes the foundation of your being. Perhaps you have seen some of the photographs that my colleagues and I were able to take of planet Earth from deep space. Perhaps from those photographs, and with your imagination, you can capture the profundity and the magnificence that we saw from that vantage point. All of my adult life had been as an engineer, scientist, a test pilot, a naval officer, working daily with the equations of mathematics, exotic equipment, the hard facts of the technical professions, and the realities of war. It is accepted knowledge that we reside on a small little planet, circling an average sun, way out on the spiral arm of a rather mundane galaxy, which is only one of the millions we can see in our telescopes. Distances are measured in light years, not in miles or even millions of miles. Those are the facts of our modern knowledge, most of which has been discovered within the last 100 years of man's existence. Facts that every school child of the space age learned in elementary school, but facts that my generation didn't really think about until adulthood, when they were thrust upon our professional lives. However, like many of you, throughout my life I have pondered the burning questions that have intrigued and troubled mankind for thousands of years, that have fueled the fires of our inquisitive searching, leading us in the 20th century to overcome the gravitational pull and carry out this venture to our nearest neighbor, the moon. Questions like, why am I here? What is our purpose? Are we simply a step above the animals? Are the planets and stars really formed by the accidental and random collision of bits of matter coming together in space because of gravitation? Is it really all an accident, or is there much, much more? Is indeed the universe created? Are we divinely created creatures? Is there a master plan that humankind and the other inhabitants of planet Earth are carrying out? I contemplated these questions while looking at the magnificence of planet Earth. Earth, floating in the vastness of space, a grain of sand in the cosmic sea. And as I did so, an experience occurred which firmly and completely calmed my mind on these troublesome questions. In an instant, I knew for certain that what I was seeing was no accident, that it did not occur randomly and without plan, that life did not, by accident, arise from the primordial earthly sea. It was as though my awareness reached out to touch the furthest star, and I was aware of being an integral part of the entire universe for one brief instant. How magnificent, how perfect, how loving, how harmonious, how orderly was this universe that we inhabit. As tiny as our physical bodies are on the scale of the universe, our minds can reach out and become one with all it is. Any questions that my curious mind might have had about our progress, about our destiny, about the nature of the universe suddenly melted away as I experienced that oneness. I could reach out and touch the furthest parts and experience the vast reaches of the universe. It was clear that those tiny pinpoints of light in such brilliant profusion were a part of the plan. They were linked together as a part of the whole as they framed and formed a backdrop for this view of planet Earth. I knew we are not alone in this universe, that Earth was only one of millions, perhaps billions of planets like our own, with intelligent life all playing a role in the great divine plan for the evolution of life. This experience was euphoric, uplifting. Mystics would call it a mystical experience, psychologists a peak experience. Theologians would say it was touching the face of God. But none of those words quite do justice to the indescribable feeling of knowing for one instant that certainly life had purpose. The universe had plan, had direction, had harmony, was structured and organized, and not as a lifeless, inanimate machine on which we are accidental passengers. However, as I continued to gaze at Earth, the euphoria, the sense of oneness, of wholeness, of participation, changed into a feeling of deep despair, the darkest, blackest despair, the most agonizing emotional pain I've ever felt. As I contemplated man and his condition on Earth, behaving more like ancient warring tribes fighting over food and territorial rights, more like lemmings rushing toward the sea, more like spoiled children fighting over favorite toys than like the involved, enlightened beings with a destiny that I now knew we were. How painful to know that beneath that blue atmosphere and white clouds were my people, the crew of Spaceship Earth, in disharmony and disarray, egocentrically, lustfully, hatefully, greedily destroying themselves and each other for lack of vision, for lack of understanding of what mankind really is. We are universal beings. We are stewards and keepers of Spaceship Earth, not the spoiled, self-serving brats we often portray. A species not knowing our own potential, not sensing the omnipotence of God, nor the limitlessness of our creative capability, not recognizing our given gifts of intelligence, intuition, creativity, that the Spirit within us is the guiding force that makes mankind great and enables us to rise above our more base instincts, to become the creative, intelligent, loving creatures of the universe that is our true reality, unwilling to rise above the angry, warring, self-serving mentality that so often directs our behavior. This despair was black and painful, but fortunately for me, my duties aboard the spacecraft interrupted these thoughts and caused me to return to my task and to function as a member of our homeward-bound crew. However, for the next 30 hours, in my moments of rest and in between crew chores, the experience was repeated. The high, the euphoria, the knowledge of man's oneness with God and his destiny in the universe, to be followed by the despair, the blackness of mood at the recognition that we are hurting only ourselves as we continue to ignore our potential, continue to ignore our higher nature and our spiritual selves in favor of the self-serving behavior that mankind too often indulges itself in. Buckminster Fuller's analogy, Spaceship Earth, appeared so apt. We of Apollo 14 were only 3 with the responsibility of conserving our resources, working as a team, following the flight plan if we were to return successfully to Earth. It is no different with Spaceship Earth, except the crew numbers billions, the craft is a planet, and the resources greater, but ample, although still limited and finite. It is clear to me that the crew of Spaceship Earth can no longer afford wastefulness, disharmony, and mutiny any more than we 3 could. For Earth to survive as a planet, and to provide for the nurturing, the growth, the well-being of the inhabitants, then we, humankind, must rise to the challenge of learning to be stewards to Earth and to each other, not the ravagers and pillagers of its resources, torn out wastefully for exaggerated self-serving desires. We need to work cooperatively with Earth, not as manipulators. We no longer can follow the patterns of our earlier, more primitive, infantile years on Earth. Patterns of the generations before, who believed because we were few in number, and the Earth was so large that its resources would last forever. Who believed, and we still believe, that conquest creates conformity, and threat produces peace. The sages and peacemakers who have dotted our history and helped pioneer the growth of knowledge and civilization, where has their message gone? For this vision says nothing that is new. The message is old, but still largely unheeded. The veneer of our civilization is so thin that it can be shattered worldwide by a single border dispute. No, it is quite apparent in the view from space how tiny, how fragile, how limited the Earth is if required to supply a civilization determined to destroy itself by misuse of its greatest gifts. In earlier times, our limited numbers and more primitive tools prevented our juvenile passions from endangering the entire world at once. Mother Earth and her species could absorb the violence of humankind's adolescent behavior. But our numerous and growing population has in the 20th century alone changed us from an agricultural, primarily pastoral world, dependent upon nature and the cooperation of nature for our survival, into a post-industrial, computerized, technical society. The nuclear space-age progress has certainly brought affluence and a way of life that primitive man could never have dreamed of. But we must pause and ask ourselves, are we using it wisely? We now have the power and knowledge to control Earth. But have we yet the wisdom and sense of destiny necessary to control the technological genie we have set free? Has the lid to Pandora's box been opened ever so little? Has the sorcerer's apprentice opened the great book of magic? Long after I returned to Earth in February of 1971, I pondered these questions and tried to understand the experience that occurred returning from the moon. I have sought the counsel of wise and gifted men, scholars, scientists, philosophers, mystics, and theologians, in an attempt not only to understand the insights, but to also reduce them to workable solutions. As humans, we all think our thoughts, dream our dreams, and have our visions of a better world, a peaceful place to live. But thoughts, dreams, and visions alone do not change the world. What they do is inspire us to a new sense of ourselves, to a new awareness of what can be done, and thus set the stage for the action that is to follow. It is appropriate to examine what has happened in that time. As a result of my view from space, I set out to find what is the potential of mankind for meaningful and productive change. What is it we can become if we but dare? The cynics say that mankind's nature will never change. We are born in passion, to war, to conquer, to seek power at the expense of others. The visionaries' dreams will inspire but not convince. They say to expect the human species to change its behavior is as futile as asking a leopard to change its spots. But what are we really? Is our nature truly just flesh and bones, a step above the animals? Or are we universal beings with great potential to determine our destiny? Along with many colleagues who share this same quest, I have rediscovered from ancient scholars and from personal experience a number of things about ourselves and about the universe that I would like to share. The human is not just an intelligent animal, born to struggle for survival, needing to defend its territory against all intruders, but a limitless spiritual creature, having a body with which to achieve its goals of learning and perfection. The picture of mankind painted by the sciences of medicine, biology, chemistry, and traditional psychology only describes our fragile physical machinery, not our essence, not our basic immortal nature. We are limited even in the body only by what we believe about ourselves. We function like 12-cylinder engines, operating on only one cylinder because we do not know what we are. That inefficient operation is only because we do not recognize that we have other great potentials. We are limited only because we think we are limited. We often say, seeing is believing, when precisely the opposite is true. Believing is seeing. When we change our belief, we will see ourselves differently. For tens of thousands of years, we have roamed the earth as nomads, fighting for survival in a harsh environment, protecting ourselves and our possessions, warring with those who seem to threaten. Only rarely have we listened to the inner voice that told us of our true destiny. Rarely have we followed the advice of the great sages and mystics who have dotted our history. More often we ignore that inner voice and that wise counsel, hearing what we want to hear, seeing what we want to see, to satisfy the desires of the moment. We have believed that life is hard, the environment threatening, and have thus made it so. We have felt lost and fearful, believing we are an accident beyond our control. This is why for me it was so important to experience the view from space. It helped me to experience a different reality. It settled in my mind once and for all that man is not an accident of the universe, and the universe itself a random occurrence of matter coming together in space. If we are here by accident, then life has no meaning, no purpose, and humankind and all the species on earth are indeed the victims of circumstance, are the flotsam and jetsam of the sea of existence without hope, without purpose, without destiny. But the experience of seeing beyond, knowing beyond, reaching out and being a part of a greater understanding, even if only for a brief instant, banishes the idea of an accidental origin. That there is purpose, that there is order and harmony in the universe, changes the entire way that we think about ourselves. You can rightly ask, does one have to go into space to have this perspective? Do you have to get out of Earth in order to see beyond and see a greater reality? Of course not. Our mystics, the philosophers, the great religious teachers of all time, have been telling us throughout history of this experience. In the philosophic literature, it is called metanoia, or change of thinking. In our Christian tradition, Christ called it to be born again. In Hindu tradition, it's called samadhi. All of these words mean to change one's consciousness and to see beyond, to perceive the greater truth. It happened and has happened to thousands of people in every walk of life and in every age. That change of thinking that causes us to rise above our previous beliefs, and to see ourselves in a different way, to see the world in a different way. It helps us to know that we're not the victims of the world and victims of our circumstances, but indeed, if victims at all, victims of our own thinking. For generations we have believed that power, force, and fear were the only workable tools to motivate people and to shape a progressive world. We're now beginning to understand that such a belief creates only fear, hatred, and distrust, precisely the opposite of what is desired. A person or a society will behave in accordance with their self-interest as they perceive them, and their own belief about reality, born of their traditions, regardless of the external pressure that one puts upon them. In both personal and world affairs, we continuously use carrot-and-stick diplomacy, always projecting our version of truth upon others. We must learn it is not possible to make a person work against their deepest self-interest or violate their self-image. But the important lesson is that the only thing we can really change is ourselves, our view of what we are, our view of the world around us. To recognize that what we see, what we think, and what we do corresponds precisely to what we each believe that we are. The view from space is important to all, because for the first time in human history, man has left the bonds of Earth and ventured deep into the void of space, leaving behind the limiting confines of our planet. This is not an individual triumph, but a turning point in evolutionary history. We have truly embarked upon a new era for mankind. If we are to become the explorers of space, reaching out from our tiny little planet to explore the immensity of the universe, then we must begin to think of ourselves as being capable of that. We must abandon the view of ourselves as provincial, limited victims of life, accidents of evolution, and start to view ourselves as limitless, capable of exploring the vast reaches of space, and capable of knowing what the universe is all about. Only then can we be prepared psychologically to live in this vast, confusing, and complex world we have created for ourselves. It is very likely that the fact of man's going into space and becoming space creatures as opposed to worldly, earthbound creatures may have more impact on our lives in the next 100 years than we can possibly foresee. I am reminded of an ancient verse that serves me well when I lose the perspective of our higher nature, for it describes the reality I want to see. It was originally written in Sanskrit and goes, God sleeps in the minerals, awakens in plants, walks in the animals, and thinks in man.
The earth is my home.